What can businesses do to support the health and well-being of their staff?
So the first thing is around normalizing conversations. So having that normalization right from the top. So people who are kind of a bit more junior feel like they can also talk about their own mental health and their own well-being. I think generally across organizations, we need to look at what communications we're sending out. So making sure that actually, again, we're opening up that line of conversation, but we're giving practical kind of top tips on actually how to manage our well-being. I think within that as well is looking at actually what our KPI focus is. So making sure that maybe once a week, we have a space in our team meetings, in our one-to-ones, to really check in on what someone's mental health is, to check in on someone's well-being, instead of getting so fixated on trying to achieve so much X, Y, Z by the kind of like a specific end date. And then I think more broadly, kind of really practically, particularly when we're looking at things like eating disorders, it's about avoiding diet chat. So making sure that we're not kind of constantly flooding ourselves with that conversation, because for all we know, we might be sitting next to someone who's really struggling with an unhealthy relationship with food. It's also about making sure that if you have team events or team activities or team lunches, making sure that they don't always happen around food, but if they do, maybe providing a menu or some options of restaurants. And the person who maybe has struggled with an eating disorder can then have a little bit more of a choice of actually where to go. And I think finally, like when you do have things like cake in the office, which I'm sure at some point will come back, it's actually not pushing people to have a slice of cake if they don't want one, like just accepting that they might not want it. I know from my experience of working kind of in offices, like the amount of times that I'd have to think of endless excuses for why I didn't want to have a piece of cake. And it was just so frustrating. And then even when people found out that I had an eating disorder, they then had this look of shock whenever I did have a slice of cake. And it's like, actually, do you know what? Like my eating disorder was never about that slice of cake. It was about so much more than that. But actually, just by giving people that space where they don't constantly feel like they are being judged left, right, and center for what they're eating, and the fear of people commenting on their foods, I think will help just create a much safer environment.
Definitely. It's taking that focus away from the body, away from food, and focusing more on what our skills and attributes can be in the office. So I find it really important to, when you're complimenting someone, say you're complimenting how they look, it's so much more valuable to say that you look really healthy, you know, you're doing a really good job at the moment, instead of telling them, oh, you've lost weight, which is never something you should say to anyone ever anyway. But yeah, it's definitely shifting that focus.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like when someone changes weight, whether they've lost weight or gained weight or they've got more muscular, it's like none of us actually know what's going on. And for all you know, you could be complimenting an eating disorder or complimenting someone's grieving process. So it is about, I guess, looking wider than just kind of fixating on what they look like kind of appearance wise.
Definitely. So similar to that, how can business leaders bust the stigma surrounding mental health in the workplace?
It's all about talking about it. It's about making sure that we talk openly, we show that empathy, we create a safe space so that people can come to work and say, do you know what, I'm having a rubbish day today. I don't feel great today. And for when individuals do that, not taking work off them. One of the biggest fears that I often hear in workplaces is that particularly kind of more junior people are anxious that if they come into work and they're having a difficult day and they say something, that actually all of their projects will be taken off and they won't be able to go for promotion, anything like that. So it's about creating a system that really, really works for that person to get the support they need, when at the same time offering that reassurance where necessary. And I think as well, like really understanding actually the impact of the pandemic on people. We know that this year has been really, really challenging on so many people. There's been things that we've loved, things that we've all hated. But I think, again, creating that space where people can be really honest about it, it helps someone to just kind of feel like, actually, do you know what? Like, I need to take a bit of a slower morning today. I need to take a little bit of a step back. And then I think the other thing that really helps with kind of busting stigma is also educating our staff. It's about educating them on actually how to spot the signs in people around them, educating them on how to have a conversation around it, and helping them to realize that actually people can function at a very high level with a mental health issue. And that's normally what seems to be happening at the moment. And that is okay. But again, create that space where actually they're functioning, but able to get that additional support when necessary.
Yeah, there's such a fear that if you voice how you're feeling, people are going to believe that you're not capable then of doing your work, which is not the case at all, and makes people feel like they have to hide it, definitely.
Yeah.
I think the discomfort that a lot of people feel comes from when they hear that someone's struggling with their mental health, they feel such a pressure to fix it. And there's no need to fix your colleague's mental health when empathy can go such a long way.
I think that it's like, quite often when someone has a mental health issue or they're struggling or having a bad day, you just want to be listened to. You don't want that sympathy. You don't want the fixer. You don't want the kind of, these are the solutions. This is what you must do. You just want that space to really offload and to just feel really heard. And quite often with like things like eating disorders and other addictions, they are a coping mechanism for something else, which means it's never really about that addiction. It's never really about the food or the weight. It's because something else isn't going right. So it's about potentially giving them that space to feel heard. And then that kind of other unhealthy behaviors will start to slot into place. I think within that as well, just kind of reflecting a little bit more on the eating disorder perspective, it is also, we have to be mindful of actually the kind of challenges that we're setting. Like, we don't want to have an organization where we're just doing X amount of steps throughout January and seeing which team can do the best. Because again, whilst that probably seems really harmless to a lot of people, it can be detrimental to people who are struggling with eating disorders as well. And I think within busting the stigma, the other kind of crucial part to kind of remember as well is that it might not necessarily be that individual who is struggling directly. We know that there are so many people out there struggling at the moment, but what that statistic doesn't bring into account is actually the wider family, whether it's parents, whether it's carers, whether it's partners, boyfriends, girlfriends, siblings, you name it, it could be anyone. And actually we need to be making sure that that person also feels like they can have that space to get that additional support within a work environment if they need it.